All right, don't miss the kickoff show this Sunday with Larry Kruger and Lorenzo Neal live 2 hours before the start of the game. Join us at the Hilton Santa Clara for delicious food, great drinks, and go say hi to Michelle, who runs the entire operation. What's up, Michelle? I'm going to see you in about a month. I need some chicken strips and some special sauce. Don't forget the pregame show is presented by Habits Law. You've been wronged. Habits Law will fight to make it right. Call 1-800-INJURED or visit habitslaw.com. We're going to bring in David Lombardi in just a second here as we get ready for the Bucs and the Niners. And last time I checked, Niners were 10.5-point favorites. I think the spread maybe have jumped to 11.5 points in this one as Tampa Bay makes their cross-country flight. Remember, they just snapped a 4-game losing streak by beating the Titans. They hadn't won in 4 weeks as they had lost to C.J. Stroud down in Houston in wild fashion. Baker's having a good year, 14 touchdown passes, 5 interceptions. He's played better than I anticipated down in Tampa Bay. Mike Evans is still Mike Evans, which is a Hall of Fame type of talent, a Hall of Fame wide receiver. And they have some guys defensively, but I look at their offensive line, and I said there's no way they're going to be able to block this front four this Sunday. And you can't play the 49ers and be one-dimensional. Jacksonville learned that last week, and plenty of teams over the last 3 years have learned that if you're a one-dimensional team and you don't even try to run the ball, well, it's going to be a long day for you against this 49ers defense. So it looks like they all got their swagger back down in Duval County in Jacksonville. So let's bring in David Lombardi, who is touring the stadium, giving us all the insights from the top row of the Jacksonville Stadium. What is it called now down there, David, as we say good morning to you? Is it Attel Stadium? I forget the name. They changed it so many times.
No, Alltel Stadium was where the 49ers lost 41-3 with Steve Young.
I remember that
final year in '99. That was the House of Horrors. It's still the same place.
Yep.
And this place, oh man, it's a dump now. This place is rotting. Literally, the humidity in the air there. It's called Everbank Stadium now.
Everbank Stadium now.
I was walking around the top rows, and all the seats are rusted. And then they have this pool in the stadium. Think of Arizona, except it just looked gross. I was not into it. I would not want to get into that pool at Everbank Stadium in Jacksonville, Florida. It's the most Florida thing ever.
Yeah, no doubt. They're going to get a new stadium soon, though. The Cons, I know, are working on it. I'm not sure if they approved a new stadium or whatnot, but I heard they're getting a facelift soon. But you wrote a great story, and it dropped yesterday. The key to Christian McCaffrey's initial success with the 49ers, a young backup named Brock Purdy. And look, Christian McCaffrey's having a spectacular season, over 1,000 all-purpose yards. He's going to be in the MVP conversation if he continues to play at this level. But Brock Purdy will be too. But their relationship, which was formed when Christian McCaffrey was just trying to learn their playbook. And David, I don't know how you got all these nuggets, but it was a great story there. If you want to elaborate on it, the relationship between Christian McCaffrey and Brock Purdy helping Christian McCaffrey learn the 49ers playbook.
Well, I think the timeline of everything is what is most jarring about all this. They traded for Christian on Thursday night, and they played the Chiefs on Sunday. And if you talk to Kyle Shanahan about the possibility of somebody being traded to the team on Thursday night and playing Sunday, at the time he said absolutely not. He thought it just wouldn't be possible for Christian McCaffrey to pick up enough of this complex offense with the motions and, the timing in time to play. But, this is a story about both men and how determined they are, how, their personalities, I think, really vibe together when it comes to pursuing a collective goal. And Christian McCaffrey wanted to play on Sunday. He was adamant about not missing a game because he had taken availability concerns really personally, flew into the Bay Area on Friday morning, didn't even make it in time for the start of practice because he had to take a physical first, and wasn't able to have a playbook on the plane because he hadn't yet passed the physical. So he had to undergo this crash course both after practice and then on Saturday on the practice field before the game. And since Brock Purdy was still the backup quarterback then, because that meant that Jimmy Garoppolo had to do his starting QB preparation, Brock was the one with a little extra time. And he went in for extra hours with Christian McCaffrey to help him walk through that playbook on an empty practice field. And then that became a tradition for the next few weeks. McCaffrey and Purdy would sit down in the team hotel if they were on the road, or, maybe even at home if they stayed at the hotel the night before the game. But they would sit down and they would go through the game script. And Purdy says that it helped him because sometimes teaching is what allows you to really double down on your knowledge. And obviously it helped McCaffrey. And the end result right now looks pretty nice, right? Right now, Brock Purdy's the NFL's top-rated quarterback, and Christian McCaffrey is the most productive skill position weapon. So what a duo the 49ers have at the top.
Wow. I love these kinds of stories because you've heard about how Bill Walsh found certain guys like Bill Ring, for example, like overhead at practice when he was just some walk-on type of a player. You hear about how he found Dwight Clark because he needed somebody to throw with the first-round quarterback, even though they didn't have a first-round draft pick, and that's how he discovered Dwight Clark. Like, I love these kinds of stories. And you reference kind of the work ethic of Christian McCaffrey, and you have a really good feel for the work ethic of Christian McCaffrey. I think he's on an MVP-type season. Like, that's what we're seeing from this guy. He has had an all-time special year. You go back with him to Stanford. Has he always been this maniacally obsessed when it comes to work ethic and perfection? Because I watch a guy who's at the height of his craft. He might be the best player in the NFL, let alone running back.
Yeah, so it's funny because Kyle Shanahan always says he has the mentality of a walk-on guy, just trying to get everybody's attention because of how hard he works, but he's the most talented player in the league. So when you combine those two things, it's very rare, right? Normally you'll have all the talent in the world, and you might be a hard worker, but you don't work as hard as the walk-on guy, or vice versa, the walk-on guy who, unfortunately, even though he busts his ass every single day, it just doesn't have the speed, the twitch, the height, whatever you need for his given position. So Christian McCaffrey has both of those, and to answer your question, yes, it goes back to his time at Stanford. The story that came out yesterday, I do go back to one anecdote from Stanford. They would run, I think it was called the 10-yard fight, and it was basically just tying two guys together. And usually you'd find somebody of a similar weight to you because it's not exactly fair to have a 320-pound lineman going up against a 200-pound running back. And anyway, they'd be tied together. They'd run in opposite directions, and the clock would be set at 60 seconds. And basically, the goal would be to get the other man to submit, to just give up because you exhausted him and you started dragging him. And the thing is, even if you beat the other player, the 60 seconds would keep on ticking, and you would try to get him to get up and go again. So you try to record as many victories as you could in those 60 seconds. And supposedly when McCaffrey was at Stanford, he would beat players that were heavier than him. They struggled to find players that they would have to go several weight classes higher to find somebody that could compete with McCaffrey. But even then, he would beat them, and everybody would be exhausted, even McCaffrey, but he was such a machine that he would run back and help the guy up. And as Shannon Turley, who was their strength coach at the time, said, he said this back in 2016, he said that Christian just wanted to kick your ass again. So he was doing the work of the coaches. The coaches would try to get the guy up. Hey, there's still time on the clock. Christian would be like, no, there's still time on the clock. I want to kick your ass again. That's the kind of machine-like mentality that he had, and I think that we've all seen it now that he's with the 49ers.
No doubt. David Lombardi from The Athletic does a great job covering the 49ers for them. They hosted Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they got back on track in Jacksonville, beating up on the Jaguars 34-3. They got back to that 30-point mark, and Deebo Samuel, I think a lot of people understand that, hey, he's valuable to this offense. Trent Williams, well, he may be the most important 49er on his team here. So how do they avoid a letdown against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers team, David, that I don't think can block this front four? Like, I'm not seeing it. I feel like the Niners are going to roll this week. What should we fear, or what should we be concerned about when it comes to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
Well, I think defensively, you're probably going to have to be most worried about Tampa Bay. That's the strong side of the ball for them. That being said, on the offensive side of the ball, the offense hadn't turned it over a lot. There's second fewest giveaways in the NFL, and Mayfield's been sacked the fifth fewest times in the NFL, which to me is a rather impressive number just because they don't have a run game at all. They might be the worst run game in the league. Rashad White's averaging only 3.3 yards per carry. So that says something about the pass protection of the offensive line. They have Tristan Wirfs as at left tackle now, and it says something about Mayfield, who I think has matured as a quarterback. And I think he can manage a game. He can go out there and make sure that the offense is not just blowing up with giveaways, and that's typically the formula that you want if you have a strong defense. The problem is that the defense isn't overpowering anymore, and the offense is down at like number 20 in explosive play rate, even with Mike Evans. And I think that needs to be a little bit better, especially if you can't run the football. So it's all that's all kind of tied together. Just the sum of it all is mediocrity, right? Jacksonville, Tampa Bay is 4-5. It's a mediocre team. What they do best is on the defensive side of the ball. They're number 7 against the run, and they're number 1 in red zone defense. And those two things are really tied together as well, because if you're good against the run, you're probably going to be good in the red zone. So they have all the tools to keep games close, right? But they don't have it because of the red zone defense, right, because of the run defense, because of the fact they avoid giveaways. They don't have the tools to blow anybody out. And the 49ers, meanwhile, have all the tools to blow somebody out, right? And that's the difference between these two teams. It's a great team against a mediocre one.
You know, I've never seen Nick Bosa more happy. Like, it's crazy. I mean, you're around him more than I am. Like, the addition of Chase Young, that's his bud. Like, that is his dude. And seeing, like, he normally, like, he'll make a play and he'll do the hands up thing where he's like shrugging, and I'm sure he's very passionate and excited, and maybe the cameras just don't catch it. But this week, man, I've never seen him be more over the top in terms of how emotional he got. Is that just a factor of the losing streak, adding Chase Young? Is that an element he's working on? Like, that surprised me.
You know, that's a good question. That's something I'm at to ponder a little bit. I think that adding Chase Young obviously can't hurt. I mean, yeah, they were good friends in college because they had that "let's meet at the quarterback" mantra at Ohio State. So now they could say, "Let's meet at the quarterback" here in San Francisco. So I think there's something to be said about the 49ers and how they've tried to build a college-like vibe in the locker room. That's something that goes back to 2017, and I think that's something that you feel when you are in this locker room versus other teams' locker rooms. And I have been in other teams' locker rooms, and I can unequivocally say that it does feel different in the 49ers locker room about that vibe. And then you toss that whole Chase Young, Nick Bosa dynamic in there, which quite literally is the college pairing that they had. How could it not make Nick Bosa smile a little bit more? That on top of that, I think that the defensive line was getting some really unfair criticism over the course of the losing streak. The pressure numbers were still there, and Steve Wilks just straight up said it yesterday. And Steve Wilks would be the first one to say the opposite, to cover himself, but he was honest because Steve Wilks is a DB guy, right? And he said, guys, the pressure was there even through the losing streak. If you watch the tape, Bosa, those guys were still getting home. The back end, which is technically Wilks' biggest responsibility, the coverage wasn't living up to its end of the bargain. So it's not very fun if you're a pass rusher and you're winning, but the ball's coming out so fast that you don't get the sack production from it, and then you're getting criticized in the media. I don't think that's a very fun cycle to go through. So I think that when the 49ers started running all these disguises and they fixed some of the stuff on the back end, and they also started stopping the run against Jacksonville, that actually allowed the wins from Nick Bosa and company to turn into sacks. And that had to be a really fun breakthrough, right? When you're finally starting to play that complementary football where the coverage is living up to its end of the bargain to help the pass rush.
Yeah, that's a great astute point there, David, about that pass rush and Bosa and Chase Young or whatnot. What do you make of Steve Wilks being down on the field? How much of an impact was that from Steve Wilks going from the press box down to the field?
I think that the 49ers wanted to reintroduce a process that was familiar to them because they were, you know, a big part of the mantra was let's get back to what worked in the past. And then you say, okay, well, what is that? Well, what worked in the past is the coverage was tied to the pass rush. Like the 49ers, I think, have almost always throughout this stretch of great defensive greatness, right, since 2019, when they've been playing really well, they've always been a pass rush driven team, but the coverage has been good enough to allow that pass rush to hit home. So there were a multitude of reasons of why it wasn't. One of them was that the run defense was not nearly as good as it had been before. And two, I think Steve Wilks was trying to introduce some new coverage concepts, and I think he still is. I think he's still trying to diversify what they do on the back end because, as we know, that the league is a chess match where you're trying to stay ahead of your opponent. But I think that some stuff got lost in translation from a communication perspective. And you would have Steve Wilks radioing down to Johnny Holland, the linebackers coach, who would radio into Fred Warner, who has the helmet with the radio in it. And I think that there just was a little bit lost there. And I think that maybe from an adjustment perspective, the 49ers thought that, maybe we're not quite, able to identify and talk about stuff the way that we want to, the way that we could if we could see eye to eye with Wilkes on the sideline. Mm-hmm. I think it was all really small stuff that might be able to turn into something bigger, because minute details can change a lot in the NFL. Right. That's the way that I looked at it, because it seems to me that Fred Warner is really happy that he could look Wilkes in the eye. It looked like some of the pictures from the sideline looked like Wilkes was vibing well with the 49ers team. So I think it's just the way that they had done things in this era. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with being up in the booth. A lot of great defensive coordinators have been up there. But if you're advocating, let's keep on doing things the way that we've been doing them, maybe that was the one detail that the 49ers needed to switch to go back to making sure that they had that continuity.
All right, David, man, Sunday, Tampa Bay. See if the Niners can stack another win, and maybe Philadelphia loses at Arrowhead Stadium. Andy Reid's really good off a bye week. Kansas City will be ready to go in that Super Bowl rematch, and you know what? Maybe the Niners will be one game behind Philadelphia when we come back and reconvene on Tuesday. David, always appreciate
Thanks, buddy. Great article.
Great article there with McCaffrey and Purdy.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Anytime. Really cool. David Lombardi here on the Morning Roast on 95.7 The Game.